So I saw the breaking news this morning with Trump announcing that they are attacking Kharg Island and the IDF is targeting Iran's railway system. So now they're going after civilian infrastructure, which means that what you have is this creeping of targets, like an expanding list of targets to try to bomb the country into submission. It hasn't worked yet. Iran has the capability and will retaliate by hitting the Gulf states, probably their oil infrastructure. So if they're bombing Kharg Island is the major offloading port for Iran's crude that they export. You can bet that they will bomb, they will strike with their missiles and drones the offloading facilities on the Gulf states on the other side of the Persian Gulf. Now, that takes time to rebuild. The way oil works, and I'm not an expert, but I spoke to experts, I've done some reading on it. When an oil well, when you have oil coming out of the ground, it has to go somewhere. You can't just shut it off and then turn it back on. Once it's shuttered in, it takes months to bring it back online. Okay? And of course, we're talking about the destruction of infrastructure as well. So we're talking several months, bare minimum, to bring everything back online. So with the energy disruptions that are going on, which major banks are already forecasting a major recession, we're talking about East Asia, where a lot of supply chain steps make things like this right here. When they start to become incapable of producing, all it takes is just, say, one component of this little mini computer. The whole chain breaks down. So we have the coming of the breakdown of supply chain steps in East Asia. The United States does not have the manufacturing base to compensate for this. Our globalized world is set where it's actually very fragile. So supply chain steps in East Asia that builds things like this, computing, and other chips, right, for everything else, from the guidance systems to our missiles to, the chips that we put on our vehicles to a lot of the cheap stuff, like a lot of our clothes that are made in Southeast Asia, to not just that, but the other byproducts, not just the fuel from the Persian Gulf, but the byproducts from the Persian Gulf. Nitrogen fertilizer being one of them. Other components that come from petrochemicals, plastics. All that becomes more expensive or doesn't get produced at all. And so this has catastrophic global consequences. We're looking at an energy-induced recession, and if this continues, which it looks like it is going to, possibly an energy-induced global depression. So again, everything is chained together. Japan depends most of its oil from the Persian Gulf. Saudi Arabia obviously gets its income by exporting its crude. Now, it does have the port on the Red Sea in a place called Yanbu, where it has a bypass pipeline from the Ghawar oil field that goes across the Arabian desert, and it has an offloading facility right there in the Red Sea. If Iran hits that, Saudi Arabia doesn't have any income. So Saudi Arabia and Japan, two very big buyers of U.S. debt. Russia, because of the sanctions, doesn't sell their oil in U.S. dollars. Iran is not letting any oil pass that is denominated in dollars. So right there, two major oil producing regions are not going to be sold in U.S. dollars as of right now. Now, of course, everything can change, but with the way things are going, it doesn't look like it. We are looking at the end of the American financial empire. With all these dollars coming back to the United States, the Federal Reserve loses policy room. We'll have to raise interest rates. The U.S. debt explodes because the Federal Reserve will have to monetize this debt because it can't. The United States wouldn't be able to turn it over with the tax revenues because interest rates are going to be so high. So much for getting rid of the IRS, right? So unless the U.S. just defaults, but really what we need is a change in the way we do things, a change in our government, changing in our policies. It looks like that's not going to happen just yet. Of course, there's a lot of other components that go into that, which I can make separate videos for. But it looks like we're going to have some very, very serious problems by the end of this year. Like I said, the shortage of nitrogen fertilizer. Yeah, other countries produce nitrogen fertilizer, but we're talking about a shutoff of one of the major suppliers, Qatar. So we're talking about food shortages possibly, right? We have crop failures, lack of fertilizer, low crop yields, rise in food prices, famine in third world countries, mass migrations from third world countries into first world countries, political instability. The Middle East imports most of its food. As you know, it's a desert, so it imports most of its food with a couple exceptions. I think Iraq and Egypt do produce food because they do have the Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile rivers. But actually, even them, I think they still produce. I think they still import a lot of their food. They're still very large populations. But again, that's a tangent. That's another video. So, this is not a good situation. We're talking about a major political upheaval that's going to really get going by the end of this year because of what is going on. We're talking about a massive economic set of troubles that are going to be worse than 2020, and I think it's going to be worse than 2008. We may very well have the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And the political chaos that that's going to cause is not imaginable. And, I can imagine it, but I don't really want to. And it's not good. It's definitely not good.